Hello, glad to see you on my channel. I really value it. And today I want to share with you a wonderful story. It's a dramatic story that will come as a total shock to everybody. It is a really amazing story. So enjoy watching it.
7-year-old Joe stood by the window and looked out into the street. The boy knew that today was the best day of his life because on this day, Joe was leaving the walls of the orphanage. The boy already knew that at this age they rarely adopt kids. The boy learned this information from the orphanage residents who were older than him. Joe had never seen his father, and the boy did not remember his mother as he was left near the orphanage when Joe was 4 years old. His parents only gave him a piece of paper with his name and date of birth. Joe had already been standing near the window for about 20 minutes. The boy started to step from foot to foot out of excitement. And at that moment, the janitor Casey came up to him. The old woman stroked the boy's head and said softly, "Worried, aren't you? Baba Casey, I offered you to be my mom many times, and you always found reasons to refuse me. And now I'm going to be taken in by my new parents, and I'm going to call Mommy Lucy and Tony Daddy. I'm happy for you, Joe. As long as your parents are good people, I'm gonna miss you. I've got my heart set on you, but I can't take my sons because I'm too old to do it. You're still very young, but your hair is all white, but that's okay. You can be dyed. I can, but it won't make me any younger." The old woman said affectionately and stroked the boy's head again. Casey had grown attached to the boy with all her heart as soon as he arrived at the orphanage. Every time she came to work, the cleaning lady tried to bring the boy something to eat, and then Joe shrieked with joy. He saw that a car had pulled up to the orphanage and his foster parents were getting out of the car. The boy ran to the front door to meet the adults. As soon as the man and woman entered, Joe immediately began to hug them. This scene was observed by Casey. The cleaning lady discreetly wiped tears from her eyes and mentally wished the pupil that he had everything in life. The old woman just dreamed that the boy's foster parents turned out to be decent people. Soon Joe left the orphanage. The boy believed that he would definitely become a good son for mom and dad, and his parents would love him. However, the boy's happiness did not last long. A year and a half after his adoption, his father came to Joe and said, "Here's the thing. Well, we're putting you back in the orphanage." "What do you mean, back to the orphanage? What did I do wrong? My class teacher doesn't complain about me, and I don't swear and I don't do bad things." The boy asked in bewilderment. "It's hard for me to explain everything to you. You know, it's not about your behavior. It's just that my mom and I, or rather we cannot love you as a child. But you loved me before." With tears in his eyes, said Joe. And at that moment, Lucy intervened in the dialogue between the adult and the child and turned to her spouse. "What are you talking to him as to little Joe will soon be 10 years old? He is already a grown-up boy." And after these words, the woman looked at the child and softly spoke. "Joe, I'm about to have a little boy of my own. And don't get us wrong, we don't want you to feel like an outcast in our family. Me and Tony, we can't love you like we love our own son. Don't hold it against us. It's just that we no longer had any hope of being parents to our own son, so we turned to the orphanage. But a miracle happened after all these years, and I got pregnant. Well, that's wonderful, so I'm going to have a baby brother. Mom, you do not worry, I will not hurt his little brother, and I, on the contrary, will protect him." Joe spoke fervently and looked at Lucy. "Joe, you misunderstand me. We don't want to raise someone else's child. I'm sorry, but we've already made our decision, and we're not going to change it," the woman said and then stroked her rounded belly. After that, Lucy looked at her husband and then went into the living room. The boy at that moment looked hopefully at the man, who only spread his hands and quietly said, "Sorry, nothing can be done. You will grow up, and when you have children of your own, then maybe you will understand everything and forgive us." After a while, Joe was already entering the orphanage. The boy did not cry, as he realized that he could not change his foster parents' minds. The boy didn't even look back at the farewell to his foster parents. He just wandered down the corridor, and the cleaning lady, who knew that Joe was returning to the orphanage, was already rushing to meet him. The older woman hugged the boy, but the child broke free from the embrace. The boy frowned at Casey and asked her not to feel sorry for him. The cleaning woman only nodded in response and said nothing. The woman that no words would help in this situation right now. A few days passed as Joe returned to the orphanage. The boy tried to socialize as little as possible with his peers, who often asked why Joe was brought back. Casey heard the boy being pestered by his classmates with questions. The woman realized it would take time for those questions to stop. The janitor also saw that the boy had become withdrawn since his return. This fact worried Casey very much. And one day, when Joe was standing aside from the guys and languidly watched the boys playing tennis, the cleaning lady came up to him and said, "You're not really socializing with your friends. You're staying away from everyone. Realize that you don't need to shut yourself in. Believe me, your foster parents were not the best. They were just dishonest. You don't have to explain anything to me. I've already figured it out. You need to rely only on yourself." The boy said grimly, "You need to rely on yourself, but you also need to trust people." The old woman answered and wanted to pet the boy, but then a high school student threw a rag at her with the words, "Corget is old." Joe heard the hurtful nickname and immediately rushed to the bully to make him apologize. But as soon as Joe approached the high school student, he grabbed him by the scruff of the neck and threw him aside. The whole scene was noticed by a security guard who immediately went over to the young man and first made the bully apologize to the older woman, and then the man helped Joe up off the floor. Casey thanked the guard and then turned to Joe. "Why do you dare get into a fight with a guy? He's a couple heads taller than you. I could have handled that bully myself." "No, Grandma Casey, you couldn't. But now I know what I want to do in the future," the boy said thoughtfully. "That's very interesting. Come on, tell me your secret. What do you want to be?" "Boxer, then I can deal with any bully," dreamily said the boy. "It's better to have brains than strength, though you need strength too. But you have to use it wisely." Time passed slowly and Joe was already in the 6th grade. The boy was not so withdrawn now. He just made himself forget that he was once adopted. Joe dreamed of only one thing, to grow up soon and start an independent life. Joe often spoke of his wish to Casey. The old woman listened with a smile to the dreams of the orphanage pupil. And once the cleaner was cleaning the back room when Joe came in to talk to her. And then suddenly Casey grabbed her heart and quietly sat down on a chair. The guy looked at the woman apprehensively, asked, "What happened?" And the cleaning woman did not say loudly, "Behind me is a closet. There is a bag lying there. Take out my purse. I've got some medicine in there." Joe immediately rushed to fulfill the request. He handed the woman a vial of medicine and then brought a glass of water. Casey drank the pill and thanked the guy who looked at her anxiously. As soon as Joe saw that the cleaning lady had removed her hand from his chest, he sighed with relief and said, "Don't scare me like that again. And by the way, I was wondering if you, Grandma Casey, were afraid I might steal money from your purse." "No, you wouldn't dare. You're a decent boy. But now I've made up my mind about my profession," the boy said thoughtfully. "And what thought came to you this time?" the old woman asked with a smile. "I will be a doctor who treats the heart. That's just what I'll do for you. This doctor is called a cardiologist. The profession is very good, but you will have to work hard, namely to push on your studies, so that you can enter a higher educational institution. But wait to guess, maybe in a month you want to become an astronaut," the woman said with a smile. "Baba Casey, I have already made my final choice. I will not change my decision. I will be a cardiologist." Time moved on slowly. Joe soon graduated from school, then entered medical school, and the state provided the young man with a one-room apartment. And then the guy began to look for a job in the evening, as he realized that the scholarship would not be enough to live on. Joe bypassed many enterprises, but could not get a job. And then his grandmother Casey, with whom he continued to communicate, told him to go to the train station and ask for a job there. And soon the boy was unloading wagons in the evening. True, the work was erratic, but Joe was happy in this work. A couple of months passed. Joe decided to visit Grandma Casey. The young man realized that it was tactless to go to the cleaning lady empty-handed, so he ran into a small market and bought mint gingerbread. Joe knew that the elderly woman adores this treat, and soon the guy was already pressing the call button. About 5 minutes later, the door was opened to him by Grandma Casey, who happily splashed her hands. The landlady invited him in and immediately said to Joe sternly, "You're unannounced again. Why the hell do you have a cell phone in your pocket? You could have called. I could have made pies. That's why I don't call, so that you, Grandma Casey, don't make a fuss when I come in. You're always putting money in my pocket. You better save up and then go to the sea for a vacation. Oh, what a nasty thing to say. What sea? I'm too old for your adventures. But you should go to a resort. Look, it's only skin to skin with bones. And I'm already regretting that at one time gave you a part-time job. The old woman said sadly and shook her head. I'm not talking nasty. I'm advising you a good thing. And you know, all I want to ask you, why do you live alone? It used to be uninteresting, but now it's interesting. I'm a one-woman man, Joe. Since I buried my husband 15 years ago, I've lived alone. I don't even want to look at other men, but God didn't give us children. That's why I live alone. The woman replied sadly. I must have opened my soul wound with my question. Do not talk nonsense. The main thing that you do not forget me, and I do not need more. I'd like to work for a few more years until you graduate from the institute to help you, and then I can sit at home. Months flew by, and Joe was already in his second year. The young man had a day off and decided to visit Grandma Casey. The boy, as always, bought mint gingerbread and was about to leave the market, as his attention was attracted by a girl who was selling t-shirts. Joe leisurely approached the saleswoman, and as soon as she stopped talking to the buyer, he turned to her. Can you help me choose a t-shirt? I'll help. I'm not difficult. Just tell me what price tag you are interested in, because I will praise the product, click my tongue, and then you say that the product is not affordable. To be honest, I'm not interested in the t-shirt at all. I just liked you, and I did not know how to meet you. The guy was embarrassed. With such an appearance as you have, be shy cannot be. You are handsome. For you, on the contrary, girls should run. Coquettishly said the salesgirl. I'm not really strong in amorous affairs. Tell me, can I meet you after work and walk you home? I will not refuse. My name is Lily. The girl mumbled and said what time she would finish work. Soon the boy was already sitting at Grandma Casey's house listening to the news about the orphanage and glancing at his watch. The landlady noticed this and asked where he was in such a hurry. Joe smiled in response and said that the old woman was wondering and that he was in no hurry. Baba Casey looked carefully at the guest and then laughed and said, And when did you manage to fall in love? What a silly thing to say, Grandma Casey. Well, do not forget to buy flowers for the first date. Girls like to be gifted with bouquets. I'll give you money for flowers. With a smile said an elderly woman. No need, you better tell me what kind of flowers to buy. Excitedly said the boy. And you say you're not in love. Take the money and buy pink roses. Casey said it and immediately went to get her purse. Soon Joe was walking with the girl and talking nicely. Lily told the guy that she herself was from a small provincial town. She came here to enter the theater school, but did not get enough points. She did not want to return home, so she rented a room for two with another girl and got a job as a saleswoman. Soon the couple came to the house where Lily lived. The guy embarrassedly asked if he could count on another meeting. The girl laughed in response and said that she would be happy to continue acquaintance. And the young people exchanged phone numbers and agreed to meet tomorrow evening. Time slowly moved on and 2 months passed unnoticed as Joe met Lily. The guy clearly realized that he had fallen in love with this blonde and wanted to live his whole life with her. Joe told Grandma Casey about it. The old woman, having listened to the pupil of the orphanage, strictly asked him, Does the girl know about your feelings for her? I want to propose to her tomorrow. I've saved up a little money. I want to buy a silver wedding ring. Embarrassed, said the guy. Your garden head. Who's going to get married with silver? Here you have to buy a gold ring. I'll add it to you and you'll go to the jewelry store. Do you know the size of Lily's finger? I do. I'm not completely stupid. Soon Joe invited Lily to a cafe where he proposed marriage. The girl, from the words of the young man, laughed. The guy looked at her with bewilderment and asked what funny he said. The interlocutor then smiled and softly replied that she had been waiting for this proposal for a long time. Joe, after his lover's words, also smiled and asked, So you will become my wife? What else can I do? Lily answered with a question to a question. Only to become my wife. Now it remains for me to introduce you to one woman. She's like a mother to me. Her name is Grandma Casey. I am sure that you will find common language with her." A few days later, Lily met the cleaning lady. The old woman seemed to the girl a meticulous lady because she asked a lot of questions and Casey, beloved Joe, did not like. The old woman seemed to Lily a windy person, as she often laughed and did it out of place. Later, Baba Casey, when she met with Joe, expressed her opinion about his chosen one. The guy frowned at the words of the cleaner and said that you cannot judge a person on the first meeting, you need to communicate with him. The old woman smiled and said in response, "I didn't say that Lily is a bad person. I just think you're in a hurry. Maybe we could have a civil marriage for a while and then get married." No, we'd already made up our minds. Soon the young people signed a marriage license. The couple did not organize a wedding, as there was no money for a lavish celebration. The newlyweds celebrated the marriage in a cozy cafe, where only the closest people were present. After signing, Lily moved to live with her husband, and after a couple of months, she realized that she was in an interesting position. Joe happily took the news in contrast to Lily, the girl. When she found out that she was pregnant, she said, "As it is not, by the way, not had time to live, as we already have a child, can make a termination of pregnancy before it's too late." "Well, you're crazy," with bewilderment said the husband Barry, and immediately added, "Other women take this news with joy, but you, judging by your words, take this message as a heavenly punishment. No termination of pregnancy. You will give birth because it's the first labor of your life. Now I'm definitely not going to study." The woman replied unhappily. Time flew by, and soon Lily gave birth to her firstborn. The couple named their son Barry. Joe rejoiced at this event like a child. The young man dreamed that the wife, after a while, he still gave him a daughter. However, Lily immediately told her husband that she will no longer give birth. Life went on. Joe realized that the family budget is failing, as the allowance that received the wife was negligible, and the scholarship of the man also left much to be desired. And in this regard, Joe began to go out as often as possible, unloading railroad cars in the evenings. She was still short of money. This fact very annoyed Lily, and she in despair once expressed to the chosen one, "Other men find a way to provide for the family, and you cannot do it. How can you even live on such a pittance? Show yourself, after all, as a man, not as a weak man." "What am I supposed to do? Should I go rob a bank? You can see I'm already unloading railroad cars every day. We'll put him in daycare when Barry's 3 years old." Time was of the essence, and soon Barry was 1.5 years old. Here, Lily put the question to a question, that she was not going to sit with the child until the age of 3. The young woman stated that she wanted to enroll and study. Joe looked indignantly at his wife and replied that he was not satisfied with her decision. Lily angrily responded to this by saying, "If that's the way you want it, you sit with Barry, and I'm sick of it. All I do is laundry, cooking, cleaning, and I'm wearing rags." Just as the young woman said this, there was a knock at the door. The young couple came to see Grandma Casey. The old woman immediately realized that the couple was quarreling. The guest looked sternly at Joe and asked him to explain himself. The man irritably said what his wife was up to. Casey looked reproachfully at the girl and said softly, "Barry's just a little kid. Come on, Lily, you'll take your time. I understand that the lack of money is maddening, especially when you are still very young and you as a girl want to buy lipstick and extra clothes. But you need to sweat. You knew very well that you are marrying a student and he needs to finish the institute. How much longer do I have to put up with this? Joe will be studying now, then I'll go to school and I'll be short of money again." Lily said with undisguised irritation. "As soon as Joe graduates from high school, he will go to work and bring in a salary. Lily, what do you want? Life is made up of difficult moments. Not everything will go smoothly. You're going through a bad time in your life because you don't have enough money, but many married couples go through this. You need to support each other now." Casey said admonishingly. Lily waved her hand in response, saying that it was useless to explain anything in this situation. Still, the young woman agreed to stay at home until Barry turned 3. However, she has already changed her decision. A couple of months later, the girl informed her spouse that she was going to go to another city. The man looked at the chosen one with bewilderment and said, "And how do you imagine family life when I live here with my son and you in another city, and in general, you were going to enter here?" "I've already found out. There's a good chance I could get into Washington. There's a theater institute in the capital." "You're talking nonsense, for God's sake. You're acting like an unreasonable child. I agree that you dream of becoming an actress, but only go here to study, no capitals. Otherwise, we will definitely soon divorce." "That's good that you agree, so it's all settled." Satisfied, said the young woman. Time passed. Barry was put into kindergarten. Lily could not re-enroll, and she went to work because she did not want to stay at home with the child. Joe was against it, but he could not insist on his decision, as Lily insisted on her decision with a firm argument that the family needed finances. Barry had only been at the daycare center for a month as he fell ill with a cold. The young woman reluctantly took sick leave. She was very angry with her spouse because of this circumstance and often took it out on her young son. And one day Casey witnessed such an incident. The old woman came to check on the family and sat with Lily in the kitchen, as at that moment Barry came in and gave his mother a broken machine. The young woman immediately frowned and said angrily, "What you don't take in your hands, you break. And I bought you this car only 2 weeks ago, and this is the result. Quickly get out of the room, and I don't want to see you here." The boy cried after his mother's words and immediately ran into the room. Casey looked reproachfully at the young woman and said softly that it was not right to do that to children. Then the old woman got up from her chair and followed the child, and on her way out of the kitchen she turned around and said, "Barry's not even 3 years old yet, and you're talking to him so badly. He's at the age where he's learning everything. What are you going to do when he's older? Don't lecture me now. You've never had a child and you don't know what it's like to be with a child all the time." "I do, and I got to do everything myself because Joe's at school and then he goes to unload the wagons in the evening." Baba Casey didn't say anything to this, but decided to talk to Joe about it. The old woman waited for the boy and then asked her to walk her a little way. On the way, the old lady told Joe about today's incident and immediately suggested, "Let me sit with Barry. Your wife has become quite nervous. She can rude words and traumatize Barry, and I still need to stay at home, not waving a rag and carrying buckets of water. I'm getting to be of age." "Sounds great, but it's a long drive to get to you, Grandma Casey. I'll discuss your offer with my wife though. If she wants to get up early before work, she can do it, but I can pick her up myself." Lily, when she heard about the cleaning lady's proposal, she gladly agreed. The woman dreamed of being in public, not sitting in a one-room apartment. Lily wanted to have a life that was not a monotonous routine. Time moved on quietly, and now Joe graduated from medical school and immediately got a job in a hospital. The man was proud that his childhood dream would come true. He often told the cleaning lady about it. They'd all laugh together, remembering why the guy chose this profession. Lily, in turn, said that she intended to go to the capital and there try her luck to enter. Joe repeatedly dissuaded his spouse from this step, and such conversations often ended in a family scandal. And so, when again it came to talk about leaving for Washington, Joe could not stand it and said, "You here twice could not get into the theater school, and then decided to go Washington, thinking that you are waiting there with open arms. Yes, there are hundreds of girls in the capital trying to become actresses, but only a few are lucky. You don't believe in me. You think I'm a mediocre person. That's why you say that." With tears in her eyes shouted the girl, "I do not consider you a nobody. I just want to make you realize that you can stay here and take a chance to enroll again." The man said to the chosen one, holding back his irritation. He could not stand to see tears in his beloved's eyes. However, Lily said firmly in response, "I will prove to you that I can enter the capital. So you didn't hear me. Go to Washington, but then you will lose your family, because I do not agree that we will live apart. Just know that you'll lose your son too." Joe thought he could convince his wife to stay in the city. However, he was wrong, because Lily took his words only as a threat to keep her near himself, and in fact she thought that the man would not do such a thing. And before long Lily was gone. Joe, who was already working, turned to Casey for help. He explained that shifts fell on weekends, and then Barry had no one to leave Barry with. "Grandma Casey, knowing the family problems, gladly agreed. Some time passed. Joe hoped that his wife would fail her exams again and return home. But to his surprise, the young woman entered not an institute, as she assumed, but a college. And as soon as it happened, Lolly called her husband and happily reported about it, and immediately added that she was waiting for him and his son in Washington. Joe said he would think about the proposal. The man told Grandma Casey about it and asked her what he should do. The old woman thought for a while and then answered that the idea was not bad in principle, but only if he could live there. And then the old woman added, "I do not boil you in any way. I want to survive with Lily together and raise a child. But the fact is that your wife will always be dissatisfied with something. You'll be able to find a job in Washington, but Lily will probably be a mediocre actress, and she'll be getting extra parts, and she'll be nervous about it, and she'll take it out on you or on her son. But it may not happen that way, so it's up to you to decide. Think it over." Joe pondered for a couple of days and then accepted his wife's proposal. Soon the man was already in the capital, where he was met by his chosen one. The couple and the child rented a room in a 2-room apartment. Barry was placed in a paid kindergarten. The man got a job as a cardiologist in a hospital, and Lily went to classes. The first 2 months were the hardest, as they were catastrophically short of money. They were saved by the money that Casey gave them for renting Joe's apartment, but still it was extremely difficult for the couple to live. The man dreamed of only one thing, that his wife soon graduated from school and they returned to their homeland. Years flew, and Lily soon received a diploma. During this time, the family often had scandals, and all because of the lack of money. The man tried not to dwell on the quarrels, and as soon as Lily said that now she could safely look for a job as an actress, Joe immediately exclaimed, "I wasn't going to move to Washington. I just wanted to keep my family together. That's why I came here." "What do you think you're doing? You want to rent a room for the rest of your life because we can't afford to buy a place here. What are you getting so worked up about? I'll get a job and I'll get a role, and then I'll have to take out a mortgage and buy a place in the suburbs. You're just afraid of difficulties, and they should not be feared, but overcome." Diminutively emphasizing each word, said the chosen one, "You live your illusions as you wish, but I'm coming home with my son. Those years in Washington were enough for me to realize how hard it is to survive here." And soon Joe and Barry left the capital. Lily stayed in Washington. She figured she could get a good job and then prove to her husband that the capital could be conquered. In the meantime, the man returned home and took another job at the hospital where he had previously worked. 2 months passed. Joe called his wife and asked when she would return home. However, the woman answered evasively, saying that she was waiting from day to day to take the lead. And soon the head of the family tired of these empty promises, and he firmly said that he is filing for divorce. Joe did not joke about the breakup of relations, and after a few days he visited the registry office where he filed for divorce. The man after that called his wife and informed about it, and also said that his son remains to live with him. Lily at the first moment opposed, but the chosen one said stiffly, "You did not care about Barry up to this point, and now you want to say that the maternal feelings have come into play, so I can make it clear to you that I will never believe it. If you're worried about child support, we're fine without your money. If you want to see your son, I'm not gonna stop you." A divorce soon took place. After the breakup of the relationship, at first Lily often called her ex-husband and was interested in his affairs. Joe discreetly answered the woman, not going into details, as he realized that Lily is completely uninterested in how he and his son live. Some time passed and Barry went to first grade. He was escorted to the festive line at school by his father and Grandma Casey. They watched with pride as the boy in the suit handed the teacher a bouquet for the first time. And now the boy's first month at the school had already passed. Barry enjoyed sharing school news with his father. The boy lately rarely remembered his mother, because if the woman called, it was very rare, and Joe Lally himself did not dial, as he considered it a waste of time. Life went on. Casey still often visited the orphanage pupil. The old lady was worried about Joe, that he was completely devoted only to work and Barry's upbringing. And one day, sitting in a guest room, the old woman started a conversation about her personal life. She said, "I can't understand you. Are you waiting for Lily to become a star in the movie industry and invite you to live in the capital? Grandma Casey, you're talking nonsense. Lily already has her own interests. She didn't even call me on September 1st to congratulate Barry on starting school. So I'm not expecting anyone. I just want you to know that I want to raise my son to be a good person. I don't want my boy to experience the pain I experienced when my foster parents put me back in the orphanage, saying I was no good for them. Barry was practically abandoned by his mother. To put things in perspective, you don't think he's worried that everyone else has a mother and he doesn't? That's what I wanted to talk to you about, that it's time you met a woman and started a family. Maybe she can be Barry's substitute mother. It happens all the time. If you were a little younger, I'd have you in my sights. The old lady said with a smile. And now I wouldn't mind if you, Grandma Casey, seduced me coquettishly. Joe replied with a laugh. Oh, you cheeky bastard. What have you been up to? The woman laughed and then, making a serious face, said, You really think about what I said. You are still young, and life flies by quickly. I will think about it, but now I want to become a first-class specialist in cardiology, so I try to stay at work longer. I'm consulting with my colleagues and learning from their experience. That's not a bad thing, but think about what I'm saying. A year and a half after that conversation, Joe was no longer called Mr. Joe at work, but Mr. Joe. Grandma Casey was very proud of the success of her ward and often put the man as an example to Barry. The boy nodded in agreement and told the old lady that he would follow in his father's footsteps. One day, Joe came to visit Casey in a pensive mood. The old woman noticed this fact at once and immediately inquired if anything had happened to Barry. Joe shook his head in the negative. The landlady took a stern look at the visitor and spluttered. Are you going to bore me with your brooding? Quickly tell me what happened. I have one idea. I want to open my own clinic, but I'm just afraid that I cannot afford it. I could take out a mortgage, but I've got to raise Barry. What do you say, Grandma Casey? Well, I'd say it's a good idea and you're a good doctor. A neighbor told me about you the other day. You did some heart surgery on him. His name's Rocky, if you remember. He's a gray-haired man in his 60s. He's a funny guy. I'll tell you that, as they say, gray in the beard, gray in the mouth. This gentleman is a joker. He's been trying to seduce our nurses. That's right. He's my neighbor. By the way, he sends his regards to you all the time. You should drop in on him sometime. The old woman spoke sympathetically and looked at the guest attentively. The man nodded affirmatively, and then Casey continued to talk about money. I have some savings, but it is not such a big sum, as they say. A drop of water in the sea, and this money will not save you. I won't get a loan from the bank because, again, there are age restrictions in the lending institution. But I have an idea, is to sell my 2-room apartment, so you'll have capital for the first time, and then you'll take a loan from the bank. What an advanced woman you are, I see. And where will you live? Joe said with a chuckle. Well, Joe, I don't have long to live in this world. I can pass my days in a nursing home. I've been thinking about that for a long time. You've been talking nonsense to me, the man said irritatedly and looked at the landlady. Only then he noticed that Casey had aged a lot in the last 6 months. Joe got up from his chair and walked over to the old lady, then hugged her and said affectionately, To hell with this clinic. Maybe Barry and I can move in with you, and I'll rent my apartment again. It'll be better for the 3 of us. And don't give me any more of those negative thoughts about how little you have left to live. If you want to move, I'm not against it. But it'll be a long commute to work and Barry's school. And about the apartment, you and I will go to the notary one of these days and I'll make a deed of gift for you. You know I can't take my real estate into the ground with me. Then you can do whatever you want with the place. In the meantime, start finding out everything you need to do. You're my Joe, a man of my word, and you'll definitely bring your plan to the end. You dreamed of being a doctor and you became one. And then you wanted to become a first-class specialist and became a doctor. You'll have a clinic in the near future. All right, Grandma Casey, let it be your way. Politely replied the guest. Joe and his son did not move in as planned. Barry had caught a cold. Joe was upset about it and afterwards told the old lady that the move would be postponed for a while. A week went by and Barry was on the mend. Joe had already started packing to move in with the old woman. The man decided that he would not take all the clothes with him at once, but would take the essentials and put the rest of the things in the closet. Joe had already packed a couple of bags when he remembered that he hadn't bought any bread, and it was getting close to lunchtime. The man grumbled and went to the store. On the way, he thought about how long it would take him to save up a small amount of money to open a clinic. He was so engrossed in counting that he suddenly bumped into a woman who was talking to a friend. The stranger shrugged nervously and said, pouring their eyes and walking the streets, knocking people down, "I, in a sober state, can even breathe on you." The man said, "I don't need to breathe your bacilli." The stranger mumbled and then picked up her companion and walked along the road. The man wanted to apologize, but the girls had already left and Joe didn't want to shout back. He shivered and hurried to the store. Soon Joe had bought some bread and was on his way home. The man walked leisurely and thought about the clinic again as suddenly someone shoved him. Joe looked over and laughed involuntarily as he saw that the stranger he himself had recently pushed was coming at him. The woman looked at the man and immediately laughed herself. Joe was the first to stop laughing and said, "Let's consider us even. True, you ran away from me so quickly that I didn't even have time to apologize to you. Let's just say that when I pushed you, that was me apologizing to you. I was just in a hurry to catch a bus that had just tailed me. I'm gonna have to wait 20 minutes. Now then, maybe we should get acquainted after all. I was in your way and prevented you from getting on the vehicle. My name is Joe," said the man and extended his hand to the stranger for a handshake. "Strange, you and I are getting acquainted. Well, I need to pass the time so we can get acquainted. My name is Nanny. It's a beautiful name like you. If you're trying to charm me, I should warn you that it's not easy to do," the woman said softly, fixing her red curl. "Then I have a chance to seduce you. Maybe we can sit down on that bench and talk to each other, because we are standing here in the middle of the street and disturbing the passersby." And with these words, the man pointed to a bench that stood not far away. The couple walked over and sat down on the bench. The man told about himself in general words, and after that the new acquaintance told about her life. Joe learned from the woman's story that she was 29 years old and had a failed marriage, which ended in a scandalous divorce, and Nanny also said that she worked at the hospital as a laboratory technician and lived alone with her mother and younger sister in a 2-room apartment. Joe, when he heard that the woman worked as a medical technician, exclaimed delightedly that they would have plenty of topics to talk about. Immediately, the man wondered what Nanny was doing in the neighborhood if she lived on the other side of town. The new acquaintance smiled and replied that she was visiting a friend who lived here. The couple chatted for a while longer as Joe's phone rang. It was the son, who was worried that his father had been gone so long from the store. The man reassured the boy and informed him that he wouldn't be much longer. Nanny, hearing that the child was worried about his father, immediately mumbled, "It's time to say goodbye or I'll miss the 3rd bus, and your son is waiting for you. Let's meet again tomorrow. Better come to my house, we'll play backgammon. How do you like my offer?" The man said with a smile, "Everything is so fast and incomprehensible, but I can't tomorrow because I'm working. But the day after tomorrow we can sit at your place and drink tea." Soon the couple exchanged phone numbers and the man accompanied the new acquaintance to the bus stop. And only when the woman got on the transport, Joe headed home. On the way, he thought about the sudden acquaintance and the fact that this girl is an incredibly beautiful person. A day later, Nanny came to visit Joe. The woman brought a small cake with her. The man introduced his son to his guest and invited everyone into the room to start a tea party. And then after a while, Joe explained to Nanny the rules of backgammon. The woman was often wrong in her moves, which amused the child. The boy would laugh and say, "Again wrong move, you Aunt Nanny lost the game again." Time flew by quickly and cheerfully, and soon the woman was going home. Joe, like a true gentleman, saw the girl off. Putting her in a cab, the man asked Nanny in which hospital she worked to meet her from work. The woman answered, and then the car started off. Coming home, Joe saw a pensive son looking out the window. The man hemmed to the child and asked what he was doing. Barry gave his father a serious look and said softly that he liked Aunt Nanny. Joe smiled and said he was glad he did. It was a week before Joe met Nanny. During that time, they had met 3 more times, and each time they had found something to talk about. The man was already thinking in his mind that perhaps it was fate that they had met in such a ridiculous way. Joe often caught himself thinking about whether the new acquaintance could become Barry's mother. One day, he was walking home after another date when he got a call from Grandma Casey. The elderly woman politely inquired where Joe had disappeared to lately. The man stoically replied that there were a lot of sick people in the hospital, and so he was a little busy with work. The old woman laughed in response and said, "Is the new job by any chance Nanny? You're catching on. Come and visit. At least tell me about your girlfriend. I'll be sure to drop by one of these days." Joe came home and went over to his son. He looked at the boy and then laughingly said that it was dangerous to go scouting with Barry. The boy looked at his father incomprehensibly and asked why that was. The man patted his son on the head and said that he couldn't keep his mouth shut and had already told Grandma Casey. Barry sighed resentfully and then said, "You should have warned him that Aunt Nanny was a secret." "It's all right, kid. Don't take offense to your daddy. I was just kidding. You'll make a great scout." Soon Joe introduced Nanny to Grandma Casey. The women talked eagerly, and as it seemed to the man, the old woman liked his beloved. When Nanny asked permission to go to the restroom, Joe decided to ask the landlady, "What do you think of Nanny? Quite sociable, young woman, behaves tactfully, no gestures. I like the woman you've chosen. How did your son take Nanny?" "He said he liked her. Barry's not a little boy either. He'll be 10 soon. Anyway, my son comes first for me, you know that. Look, you're not a kid anymore. You need to meet somewhere. I know you're going to propose to her, so I suggest we move into this apartment. That way Barry can have her own room and I can move into yours." The older woman said softly, "Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. You've forgotten that I was going to move in with you." The man replied thoughtfully. Joe in fact soon proposed to Nanny and they signed. The man accepted Grandma Casey's proposal, and the family moved into a 2-room apartment. Nanny already knew that the old lady had made a gift to her husband, and also the woman knew about her spouse's dream and very much wanted him to realize his wishes. Several months passed, and Joe began to notice that his son was increasingly asking to spend the night at Grandma Casey's house. The father could not understand what was happening to Barry. The man tried to talk to the son, but he responded by saying that it was easier for him to get to school from his old place of residence. Joe believed the kid, because that's the way it really was. But there was something about the boy's behavior that bothered Joe, so he asked Grandma Casey to have a straight talk with Barry. The old lady nodded in agreement, and a few months later, the old woman asked Joe to come over to talk to her. As soon as the man appeared in the apartment, the grandmother looked sternly at Joe and then firmly said that Nanny was a real sneak. The man stared at the old lady in bewilderment and asked, "What's that supposed to mean?" Casey, sighing heavily, told him that Barry had been an unwilling listener to your wife's conversation with her sister when she came to visit you. Well, Nanny confessed to this Betty girl that she hated Barry, that everything about him annoyed her. That can't be true. They get on very well together. Nanny told me how she plays backgammon with Barry when I'm away. Nanny told her sister that she would burn that game, but you like it, and your lover doesn't like backgammon, and she only lives with you because you're going to open a clinic. And she is waiting for me to give my soul to God so that you can sell this apartment and go into business." The old woman spoke sharply. The man nervously rubbed his temples with his hands and then looked at the old woman sullenly and made an assumption that jealousy speaks in the son, and that's why he came up with such nonsense. Casey looked the man in the eye and said softly but firmly, "I have no reason to distrust your son. I've known Barry since he was born, and I haven't known Nanny very long. What am I supposed to do now, Grandma Casey? I don't know what to say. Maybe let me talk to your wife. Try to do it in a friendly way and find out clearly what your beloved wants." After some time, the old lady met with Nanny, and after this conversation, the old woman was taken to the intensive care unit. Casey had a heart attack. When Joe found out about it, he immediately appeared near the bed of the sick woman. He grabbed the old lady's hand and asked what had happened. "A neighbor called me and said an ambulance had taken you away. I was at home at that time, and after the call, I rushed to the hospital. The neighbor also told me that Nanny came to see you, and after her visit, you called the woman across the street to call an ambulance. If it's hard for you to talk right now, don't say anything. I'm going to look up your appointment history and find out everything about your condition. You'll find out later or I won't make it to tomorrow after this conversation. Your son was telling the truth. She hates the boy with every fiber of her being, and she hates me too, that I'm still breathing. I just tried to tell your lover that Barry and I should get along, because he's a good boy. And Nanny answered me that she was sick of the presence of other people's children, but she had to play the role of polite, good-natured hostess. I asked her what would happen if you found out about all this and and she laughed in my face and told me I was senile and making it all up. So I reminded Nanny of her conversation with her sister. Your wife told me that the child had said it from my words, and your wife also told me, an old woman, that I stink of old age. I've never been so insulted in my life. And that's when Casey started to feel sick, passed out. Joe immediately called the doctor on duty and together with him began to deal with the old woman's condition. In a few minutes, she was taken to the intensive care unit. Joe sat in the hospital corridor with his hands on his head. Every 10 minutes, he looked into the intensive care unit and asked the Almighty to make the old woman well. He did not want to believe that Nanny, who he had fallen in love with, was such an unscrupulous person. But Joe realized that Grandma Casey would never lie to him. The old lady always told the truth, even if the truth was bitter. After a while, the attending physician came out to see Joe and advised the man to go home. Joe turned his head negatively and said that his help might be needed at any minute. The doctor patted his colleague on the shoulder and said, "You have an early shift tomorrow morning and you should get some rest. I promise that Casey will be under constant supervision of our medical staff." It was only after these words that Joe agreed to leave the walls of the hospital. He drove home and was torn by contradictory thoughts about what to do in this situation. On the one hand, the man wanted to throw his wife out of the house in 1 hour to never see her again. And on the other hand, Joe wanted to find out from his wife why she was so angry with the child and hated the old woman. The man soon arrived home. He saw his son engaged in lessons and his spouse preparing some dish in the kitchen for the evening. Joe went in before the chosen one and immediately closed the door. The man did not want his son to witness this conversation. Joe approached his wife and softly said, "How's your mood?" Nanny turned and then pronounced that she was doing great and then asked where he had been all this time. The man barely restrained himself from shouting and whispered that he was very happy that everything was fine with his wife. And then he added, "Your visit to Grandma Casey ended beautifully. Why don't you tell me what you two had a womanly chat about?" "We talked about cooking. She told me to make pilaf, which I'm doing right now. Why are you so angry?" "Grandma Casey's hated pilaf since she was a kid. What a paradox. Why didn't you say something else? You know, I have a big favor to ask of you. I don't need you to make a show in front of me right now. What you said, I already know, but I'm more interested in something else. How could you say such mean things to Grandma Casey at her age?" "What did I say? How dare you talk to me like that?" Nanny exclaimed and raised her hand for a slap as the kitchen door opened and Barry entered. Looking at the adults in bewilderment, Joe was the first to come to the senses. He turned to his son and asked him to leave him to talk to Aunt Nanny. Barry frowned and said, "I understand that Grandma Casey has told you, Pa, and you're fighting about it now. What did that old woman tell you?" At the same moment, Nanny asked the boy a question. "About your phone conversation with your sister." Barry replied dejectedly. At the same moment, Joe again asked his son to leave the kitchen. As soon as the doors closed behind the child, the man turned to his wife and said angrily that Grandma Casey was in the hospital in critical condition. Nanny opened her eyes wide and calmly asked, "What's that got to do with me? It was your son who made up a little extra and informed Grandma. You need to have a serious talk with Barry, as he's been doing a lot of unnecessary things. I think there's been some incredible misunderstanding and it needs to be sorted out." "We're not going to sort anything out. You're just going to pack your things and leave this apartment. And my advice to you, pray to God that Grandma Casey gets better." The man spoke harshly. Nanny tried to talk to her husband, but he looked away and didn't respond with a single word. Then the woman shouted in her heart that Joe never loved her, but only used her as a housewife. The man, hearing this, grinned and said sarcastically, "You're wrong, sweetheart. I treated you with all my heart, but you put everything on top of everything with your act. Yes, I dreamed of opening a clinic and it will happen, but only you will be a new husband who will give you all the charms of life. which you counted on. And you know, before you, my son and I were doing a great job with the household. Soon Nanny left, and Barry approached his father and asked sadly if his father was angry with him. The man patted his son's hair and said he wasn't mad at him at all. And then Joe asked the child to confide all the secrets to him first, and then to tell Grandma Casey, and then the head of the family added, "It's just that our old lady has a weak heart, and she can't be worried in the slightest. She's in the hospital now and she's very sick. So it's my fault that Grandma went to the hospital." With tears in his eyes said the boy, "Not at all. Aunt Nanny was not a very decent woman, but I didn't see it in time. But don't worry, son. Everything will be fine, and our grandmother will definitely get better." Some time passed. Casey was soon discharged from the hospital, and Joe applied to the registry office for the dissolution of the marriage. The old woman saw that the man was worried about what had happened, and it was unbearably painful to watch him gnawing torment of conscience. And then the old woman asked Joe to sit down and said, "What has happened is nobody's fault, and you mustn't blame yourself for anything. I ask you to get on with your life and go on with your life. The only thing I can add is that it was Nanny who needed to enter the Theater Institute, and here she is, honestly, a great actress that held even me, a mature woman." "You're right." With a smile, the man said, and immediately slapped himself on the forehead and said about the goal, "Then we need to remember Plan A, which means to start living under the same roof. I don't think there will be any objections. And one more personal statement for Grandma Casey. I want you to know that I will not have any women until I reach my goal. Don't be too early. Love is a hard thing to get rid of." The older woman said with a smile. Joe purposefully set about moving. The man wanted the old woman to live with them as soon as possible. He wanted to protect the old woman from all the hardships. Joe realized that the old woman had only a short time to live, and the man just wanted Grandma Casey to live her last days without worries. It was as if Joe felt that the old woman would soon go to the next world, and so soon the old woman returned to her former place of residence. However, Casey lived only 2 weeks with the new household, and early in the morning she closed her eyes, never to open them again. Joe grieved greatly on the day of the funeral. He was not shy about expressing his emotions, and tears were streaming down his face. The man heard many kind words about Casey on the day of the burial. Joe had no idea that so many people would come to the funeral. Several years passed after the funeral. During this time, Joe never settled his personal life, although women gave him signs of attention. However, the man ignored this and went straight into the clinic. He sold his studio apartment and went into business. Initially, the clinic was little used, but year after year, people were already signing up to go to the hospital in advance. Joe was really proud that he was able to realize another of his dreams. And one day he decided to check on Casey. The man bought mint gingerbread and a bouquet of artificial flowers. He went to the cemetery. Joe opened the fence and politely said hello to the deceased woman, and then put the gingerbread on the grave and softly said, "I wanted to talk to you so much, Grandma Casey. You wouldn't believe how much I miss you sometimes. You've been like a mom and dad to me. I wanted to tell you this so many times in my lifetime, but I never got around to it. By the way, I haven't forgotten that you like peppermint gingerbread. Even Barry remembers that. Barry's gonna be 14 years old soon, and he's gonna get his passport. It's a shame you won't live to see that day. And I want to tell you the news. I have a clinic. I was able to achieve my dream. But it's all because you believed in me. Your fate still gives me hope. Now all I have left is to raise Barry to be an honorable man. I believe I can do that, since you're watching over him from heaven." A month flew by as Joe drove his automobile that he had recently purchased. The man was thinking about what to buy his son as a present, because after all, the teenager was turning 14. And then Joe remembered that Barry had once mentioned a new phone and a selfie stick. The man stopped by the cell phone store. He consulted with the salesman and a short time later made the purchases. Joe was returning home in a good mood. Rather, he parked the car near the entrance and was about to go in, as he was called by name. The man looked around and said in surprise, "What an unexpected meeting. What fates you, Lily? A great artist brought to our hometown." "Don't be sarcastic. I want to see my son. I see you've been working hard. You're a famous doctor in this county. You must be making a lot of money. Let's start in order. I didn't say anything sarcastic. Let's go on about the son. I've got nothing against him. Barry didn't say anything bad about you. You say you're a famous doctor. I can't tell you anything about that because I'm not in the habit of praising myself. And lastly, about the money. I cannot say that mushroom finances shovel as I still pay in the bank to the court. Well, take my word for it. Barry and I have money for bread and butter. Now I have a question. If you're asking for money, then maybe your showing up has nothing to do with your son's date. And you showed up here to borrow a certain amount of money. No, bite me, or I might snap your teeth too. I really want to see Barry. Come on, let's go to the apartment. Barry should be home from school by now. By the way, how did you find us? I was looking at the billboards and I saw your face. Anyway, we're better to look than at Grandma Casey's apartment. She said a long time ago that the real estate will be yours. The woman said and went into the entryway. Soon Barry entered the apartment. When he saw the guest, he looked at his father with incomprehension. Joe understood his son's surprise, as he knew that the last time Lily had been here was several years ago. The man smiled at the teenager and said, "Do you recognize this lady? Looks like her mom, but what's she doing here?" "Son, it's not nice to greet guests like that. Say hello first. And now I'll tell you that Mom's here to see you." Barry forced himself to smile and said the greeting softly, then asked his mother what she was here for. Lily walked over to the young man and tried to hug him, but Barry twisted away and asked his question again. The woman shrugged and said nonchalantly, turning to her husband, "Strange, you raised your son not to want to talk to his mom. Let you dismiss me from your remarks," calmly pronounced the man. At the same moment in the conversation of adults stirred a teenager who said, "Mom, I really don't know what you're here for. It's even hard for me to call you mother, since it's a word I haven't used in years, and please don't accuse your father of anything. I will not be rude to you, even if you call me some rude word, because my dad taught me that the weaker sex should not be insulted, and in this case you are a woman. I just came to see you and I brought you some presents. Here you go." And the woman handed the guy a bag with a tablet in it. After that, the woman looked at her husband with a contemptuous look and then went to the exit. Father and son, as soon as the door closed behind Lily, they looked at each other in bewilderment. The man spread his hands and said that he didn't understand the purpose of the visit. Barry, in turn, muttered puzzledly that he was shocked to see his mother after so many years. Some time passed and Barry's birthday came. The teenager invited his two friends Anthony and Harry to the celebration. They tasted the birthday dishes prepared by Joe and then had tea and cake. And at the same moment, Barry asked his father to allow him to go out with his buddies. The man understood that his son wanted to check out the cell phone and selfie stick as soon as possible, so he let the youngster go with pleasure. The man, when the teens left, then leisurely began to clean up everything from the holiday table. Joe thought about how his son was now excitedly showing off his new cell phone to his comrades and bragging about the selfie stick. The man envisioned that once Barry got home, he would be enthusiastically bragging about the pictures he had taken. Time slowly moved on. Ahead, Barry should have been home by now, but he wasn't there yet. The landlord felt a vague uneasiness in his soul. He dialed his son, but the caller was out of range. The man made several more attempts, which were unsuccessful. Joe mentally groaned and decided that as soon as his son returned, he would give him a beating. Just as Joe was thinking that, the cell phone rang. The man looked at the number and immediately realized that the call was from his clinic. He picked up the phone and heard the voice of Nurse Leslie excitedly calling out his son's name. Joe asked his subordinate to calm down and report everything clearly. The girl gathered her courage and said, "Your son has been brought to us. His buddies called us on the phone and said that Barry had fallen under the water. That's all I know." "Is Joe conscious?" the interviewer asked quickly. "Yes, the doctor on duty is attending to him," answered the nurse. "I'll be right there." Joe immediately jumped outside, got into his car and drove to the clinic. On the way, the man only wanted one thing, that nothing terrible should happen to his son. As soon as he showed up at the clinic, he went straight to the room where his son was. He made sure Barry was out of danger and breathed a sigh of relief, then asked what had happened. The teenager looked guiltily at his father and quietly reported, We decided to take extreme pictures and went to the river. I wanted to take a picture on the ice, but I saw that it was still dangerous to walk on the ice. And then Anthony started nudging me that I wouldn't take these pictures, so I decided to prove otherwise to my friends. I stepped onto the ice, took a few steps, and then started taking pictures. And eventually, the ice cracked and I instantly went down. And then I vaguely remember what happened as I blacked out for a while. Dad, your present also drowned. Are you going to swear? You could use a good whipping for rash behavior, but you know I don't use those methods. And about the gifts, the hell with them. You probably don't want a selfie stick because you want to take extreme. Suddenly, a vagrant woman appeared who understood everything without words. The woman, not thinking long, threw off her sweatshirt and boots and immediately jumped into the river. The beggar dived in and picked up the teenager, then pulled him to the shore. The boy was unconscious as he had already swallowed water. The vagrant shouted to the guys to call an ambulance, and then the stranger began to give Barry artificial respiration, and soon the guy began to choke and then breathe. Anthony called exactly the hospital where Barry's father worked. Soon an ambulance arrived and the three of them were taken away. The man looked at Anthony in bewilderment and immediately asked why the woman who had saved his son had not been taken away. Barry's other friend said that the paramedics had asked if she needed help, but the vagrant had refused, saying she could manage on her own. Joe was stunned by what his son's friends had told him, and he was also outraged by the way the paramedics behaved. The man couldn't understand how the away team could leave a woman who had been in icy water on the street. Joe turned to the kid and asked them, "Do you know this tramp? That's Cindy. She hangs out there a lot. She's got a little barn where she lives." Anthony said, "Come on, let's go quickly. You can show me the way. How could that poor woman be left there and not picked up?" "Okay, I'll deal with the road crew afterwards. I don't have time for this right now. You tell me, why did they call her a limp?" "She limps on one leg. Don't ask me why, I don't know. Tell me, how much will you punish Barry?" Anthony asked excitedly. "Don't worry about your friend. I'll give this reckless teenager a preventive talk so that he will draw conclusions for the future," the man said. Soon Joe and the teenager were already approaching the river bank. Then they got out of the car and Anthony showed them where Barry had fallen through the ice. Joe looked reproachfully at the boy and said that if that beggar had not arrived in time, Barry would not be alive. The teenager lowered his head after these words, and the man asked him to show him where Cindy lived. Anthony immediately raised his head and pointed with his hand to a small building that stood a little farther away. Joe immediately headed toward the barn. He could already see that a stove was being stoked there. The man walked up to the structure and knocked on the door. Joe stood waiting for a few minutes before a woman of indeterminate age opened the door. As soon as he saw the vagrant, he said a polite hello and then asked permission to go inside. Stopped by to see his savior to express his gratitude. At the end of the day, Joe asked the nurse how the new nurse was doing. The girl in the white coat smiled, saying, "A very pleasant woman to talk to," and then pointed to a figure approaching them. The man looked over, saw that it was the very savior of his son. Now Joe had now roughly given the woman's age between 50 and 55. He walked over to the new babysitter and complimented her. "This outfit suits you better than the one I first saw you in. Now I realize who my son is taken after. You can see that he's like his father. He came up to me today and thanked me. And you know, it was noticeable that he was brought up in a very respectable way." Cindy said with a smile, "Thank you for the compliment. We're kind of exchanging pleasantries," he said with a laugh. "It wasn't a compliment on my part, but a fact," the woman said and walked down the hospital corridor. The man looked after her and thought that she was a person with a difficult character. Time moved on slowly, and Cindy had been working at the clinic for a month now. She performed her duties faithfully and never complained that she was having a hard time. The only thing that remained a mystery to the staff was how this outgoing woman had become a vagrant. Many tried to talk to the new nanny, but as soon as the topic touched on her past life, she simply changed the subject. Another week passed and a patient was admitted to the clinic. Her name was Nanny. The woman was a wealthy client and demanded that the staff treat her in a special way. Joe, from the moment of acquaintance, immediately realized that this lady would bring a lot of trouble, as she was a capricious person and soon the first to complain about Nanny was Nurse Leslie. The girl came into Joe's office and tearfully confessed that the new patient was simply terrorizing the staff. The man looked at Leslie in surprise and asked what it was. The nurse swiped at her tears with a handkerchief and said, "I brought her the pills she drinks after breakfast and handed her a glass of water to wash it down. So this lady took a sip and said I was making fun of her. I was just shocked by this statement and asked what I had done wrong. This lady replied that the water was too cold, and then she tossed the glass aside." "Leslie, calm down. I'll try to calm this fury down, but you must keep an even keel with Nanny and not allow yourself to say rude things to her. I hate to miss out on this client." A day later, Joe was already knocked on the door by the cook, who indignantly said that the woman from Ward 4 was overstepping her bounds. The man immediately realized what he was talking about. He asked what had happened this time. The kitchen worker said loudly and clearly, "This snooty woman demanded in an orderly tone that I cook her an omelet separately according to her recipe. I've never heard such a thing before, a sick person dictating her terms. She has her daughter's husband, so let them cook for her, and I won't do it." Joe walked out of his office as he was approached by an orderly, Elsa, who had also complained about Nanny. The older woman stated that the patient had made her scrub the floors of the ward several times. The man did his best to calm the nurse and hurried into the room. Just as he was about to meet her, he came across Cindy, who was walking down the hospital corridor with a leisurely limp. Joe stopped Cindy and asked, "What's your beef with the new patient? I heard so much these days, I might as well listen to you." "Now I have no complaints about this woman. She just wants to show that she's the center of the universe. But this person is greatly mistaken, as we are all equal before the Lord God. I think that someday this woman will realize this truth. At least one person isn't complaining. This one's sick. Thank you, Cindy. I'm gonna go restrain this one." Soon Joe was sitting in Nanny's room listening to the complaints about the medical staff. The man asked the woman to calm down and promised that he would talk to the staff and point out their shortcomings. Joe knew perfectly well that he would not talk to anyone. He just wanted the sick woman to believe in her power and give the staff a little break from themselves. On this day, Joe was coming home in a tired state. He was more tired of Nanny's screaming than he was of his work. When the man entered the house, he saw his son busy doing something. The landlord called Barry's name, and the boy at the same moment hid something behind him. Joe was surprised at this fact and asked, "You got a secret you didn't expect me to tell you, son?" "It's not a secret. It's just that your birthday is coming up, and it's better to get presents on the day of the party, so I don't want to show you what I'm going to give you." "Well, that's commendable. I forgot about my birthday at work. We have a patient with an unbearable temper. You have no idea, but the whole clinic is suffering. I'll probably go to bed early tonight because my head is splitting in two." However, the man did not manage to sleep that night because the nurse called and, with a tremor in her voice, asked him to come urgently. Joe asked what happened, but the girl was crying and asked to come to the clinic. He wrote a note to his son that he was urgently called to work and only then left the house. Soon the man was already entering the clinic. Leslie immediately jumped up to him and began to explain something confusingly. Joe told the girl in a white coat to immediately calm down and start talking in a calmer tone. But Leslie only cried more and immediately ran to the restroom. Joe noticed the doctor on duty, Cody, walking toward him. The superintendent looked at the doctor and asked for an explanation. The man in the white coat shrugged his shoulders and said, "There's an outrage going on in our clinic. The nurses think they are doctors and are playing doctors. What can I tell you?" Leslie came running to me crying and screaming that Nurse Cindy had taken a woman from room 4 to the emergency room. Apparently, her heart had stopped. I promptly headed to the ICU and saw a perfect picture of Cindy manipulating the patient. Naturally, I yelled for the nurse to get away from Nanny, and Cindy demanded that I hand her the instruments. And what happened next? Is the patient alive? Joe cried out excitedly. "She's alive and breathing, but she's in intensive care. I don't know who the nurse is, but she saved Nanny's life. I'm going to check on her now, and you, Cody, find me this Cindy and bring her into my office. Oh, and one more thing, calm Leslie down. She's got a lot of nerve." Joe strode swiftly into the emergency room. He looked at the instruments and breathed a sigh of relief as the patient was out of danger. The man left the ICU and saw Leslie walking down the hallway with her eyes red from crying. Joe waited until the girl in the white coat was on a par with him and then said, "You are overreacting to extreme situations. Realize that you can't do that. At work, you must be a collected person because the life of a sick person depends on your actions. If you are not coping with your duties, you need to change your profession." "Excuse me, I was just afraid that you would fire me because I didn't see the nurse go to the intensive care unit," Leslie said excitedly. "I'm not going to fire anyone at this late hour, and you get a grip." After a short dialogue with the nurse, the man headed for his office. He sat down at his desk and wrapped his arms around his head. Joe realized that he had almost lost a patient today. She had been saved by the nurse. The man was at a loss as he didn't realize who this woman was who had been loitering before. He was distracted from his thoughts by a knock on the door. Joe said softly that it was okay to come in, and at the same moment, Cindy entered the office. She said quietly, "You paged me? Cody told me about it." "I did. Have a seat and let's have a serious talk. You must have chosen to be a savior in this life. You saved another person today, and that's a phenomenon to me. Let's agree that you're going to tell me all about yourself. Understand, you basically took a wrong turn when you started to save the patient, but you did it masterfully, so I want to know who's underneath the nurse's mask. You really want to know who I am? If I wasn't interested, I wouldn't have invited you into my office, and you don't have to worry about the time, because I have no sleep in any of my eyes, so I'm ready to listen to you carefully." The woman sat down in a chair and then looked at the man carefully. She was in no hurry to begin her story, and Joe was in no hurry, for he could see that Cindy was gathering her wits before she began her narrative. And soon the woman spoke. Cindy had not known her mother since childhood, as she had abandoned the baby while still in the maternity hospital. The reason for the act was that the girl had one leg 3 centimeters smaller than the other. It was this circumstance that forced the woman to sign the abandonment papers at the maternity hospital. Then Cindy found herself in an orphanage, and from there to an orphanage. The years spent in an orphanage were unremarkable. The girl grew up and dreamed of becoming a doctor to try to cure herself of her physical ailment. However, after graduating from school, Cindy was not able to enter higher education, as there were not enough points. The girl decided that she would try next year to pass the exams, and at this time began to look for a job. She did not want to work as a salesman, so she got a job at a dairy factory collecting cardboard boxes. At first, Cindy had a hard time, as she often hurt her hands on the corners of the cardboard, but then she got used to it. She enjoyed her work because no one was bothering her and she could dream about her future life while working. 6 months later, Cindy met a young man. She was inexperienced in amorous affairs, as guys did not want to communicate with her because of her limp. So when Cindy met Matthew, she took the relationship seriously and mentally even dreamed of creating a family with them. However, the guy was in no hurry to make an offer, and when she found out about the pregnancy, he immediately evaporated, taking a large stash, which she was saving to buy a TV. At that, the man, as he left, skeptically told Cindy, "You've got to eat for 2 now. You've got to take care of your health." And after that, the young woman never saw him again. Cindy did not terminate the pregnancy and decided to have the baby. At the maternity hospital, she met a gynecologist who had just recently graduated from the institute. The man gave Cindy signs of attention, but she no longer believed the representatives of the stronger sex, so she did not give the guy not a single chance to win her heart. And the young man Perry, in order to somehow get the girl's attention, personally met her from the maternity hospital with a boy with a huge bouquet of flowers. He told Cindy, "Believe it or not, I fell in love with you at first sight. I'm ready to go to the registry office with you tomorrow." Cindy initially refused the proposal, but Perry was persistent, and one day the young woman gave the go-ahead to become his wife. The guy, before going to the registry office, admitted to the girl that he could not have children for health reasons. Cindy answered him to this, "We have Ricky, and 1 child is enough for him to grow up without needing anything." Time ran forward. Soon the child was 3 years old and was put in daycare. And then Cindy went to medical school. She dreamed of becoming a doctor, but decided not to risk it and became a nurse to begin with. As the years flew by, Cindy graduated and got a job at a hospital as an operating room nurse. The woman's husband continued to work as a gynecologist, and everything in the family was great until a certain point. Difficulties began when Ricky went to the 10th grade. The guy got involved with a bad company and began to steal things from home. And then the teenager dropped out of school and committed with the guys a robbery attack on a supermarket. The kid got time served. Parents were going crazy as they did not know how to fix the situation. After some time, Ricky was released. Cindy and Perry believed that the son will learn some lesson after committing a crime, but it did not happen. He only became more aggressive and often consumed hard liquor. And one day, when Ricky came home drunk, his father turned to the son. "If you do not stop leading such a way of life, then we'll throw you out of the apartment and then you live on your own. You made me into the world, now you have to suffer with your favorite boy. How do you talk to your father? I'll put you in your place right now," yelled Perry. And at the same moment, Ricky grabbed a knife from the table and waved it in front of his father's nose. Perry looked at his son and didn't recognize him. Meanwhile, Ricky grinned and rudely demanded money from his dad. The head of the household refused. That's when the son and father had their first fight. After that, violence became a frequent occurrence in the family, and one day the mother couldn't take it anymore and told her son, "Go away and don't come back. You're acting like a chicken shit, and we gave you our best years to have everything." And the boy at the same moment grabbed his father and pulled him to him. After that, 20-year-old Ricky put a knife to his father's throat and demanded from his mother that she write a receipt that the apartment passes into his ownership. The woman, afraid for her husband's life, wrote the document, but then suddenly the head of the family took the floor and said, "With this paper you can go to the toilet, as it is not certified by a lawyer." "Thanks, Daddy, for the valuable advice," Ricky said and turned to his mother again. "You'll have to go right now and get the document in accordance with the law, and I'll sit here and watch Daddy so he doesn't do anything stupid." The woman, seeing her son's angry face, rushed to the notary's office where she executed the document. Cindy did not even think about going to the police because she was worried about her husband's fate. As soon as Ricky received the desired document, he immediately asked to vacate the apartment. Parents had nothing to do but to fulfill their son's request. And after Ricky put the property for sale, at the same time, the parents of the son lived with acquaintances, and Perry decided to talk to Ricky again. He came home and saw that the guy was drunk and smiling happily. Perry walked right up to the son and said, "Come to your senses. What are you doing? It's too late to think. The apartment is sold, and the money is given to the creditor, from whom I borrowed to pay the car debt. So pack your things. Go live wherever you want. I'll do that too. Although I have a house, it's a prison. You're a worthless man," Perry retorted. Just then he received several blows to the stomach, from which he died on the spot. And then the trial took place, where Ricky was given a prison sentence. Here Cindy stopped telling her story and looked at the head of the clinic, who sat silent. The woman remained silent and said nothing. The silence was broken by Joe, who asked why she started loitering afterward. The man couldn't understand why Cindy didn't go to a special rehabilitation center. The woman smiled in response and said, "What center? After my husband's death, I started drinking. My acquaintances did not tolerate me for long and soon asked me to move out of the apartment. I was fired from my job for absenteeism, and I was ashamed to be in the city where I had everything. And overnight, everything disappeared, so I left there and started begging. That's my story. It doesn't sound great, but that's life. You know, but there's still a way out of your situation. It's your fault for giving up. I have no right to judge you, but I can tell you that you're a first-rate nurse, and I think that's the role I'd like to see you in. How do you see it?" "Why are you asking me that? You need to ask that of the medical staff, how they would react to an orderly and former vagrant suddenly becoming a nurse. It's just that I don't want to publicize my life in the past anyway," the woman said tiredly. "And we're not going to tell you anything. Let it remain a little secret between us," Joe said in reply. After that, the couple talked until morning. They talked about life, about their childhood in the orphanage. Cindy was glad she had found someone to pour her heart out to. At the end of the conversation, the woman thanked the man for not being indifferent to her fate. A day later, the The whole clinic knew that Cindy was no longer an orderly, but a nurse. The whole staff was surprised. The staff didn't know where to find answers to their questions. Meanwhile, Cindy was making rounds with Joe, and they walked into a room where a woman who had been rescued by a nurse had been transferred from the ICU. As soon as Naomi saw Cindy holding her card, she was outraged. "Why is that orderly holding my medical document with her own hands? As you put it, that nurse saved your life. You should only be grateful to her that now you breathe this air and can so unfairly offend the medical staff. And if I were you, I'd think about how you can repay this woman in the way she deserves. If you like, drop by my office and I'll give you a clue as to how it can be done." Soon the rounds were over and Cindy peeked into Joe's office. She embarrassedly said that she had one question that was bugging her. The man smiled, mouthed that he was ready to answer. The woman smiled and said, "You said you'd tell Naomi how to thank me, and I was curious about your advice to this woman." The man laughed and a moment later said with a smile that it was very simple, and then he explained in more detail. "You are a so-called person of no fixed abode. It seems to me that the reward for saving a person should be substantial, so I will offer this option, to buy you an apartment, and even Naomi will give part of the money. I mean, you helped me out in my day. You don't know how much you've helped me. I didn't think I'd ever stop eating garbage cans and sleeping on sheets. Thank you," Cindy said tearfully. "And here we are again, exchanging pleasantries," Joe said with a laugh. "I think it's going to become a tradition with us, but you know, I agree, because it's an honor to work under you. You're a good man, and I'm grateful that fate brought us together. However, I would have met you better under different circumstances." With these words, the woman approached her interlocutor and extended her palms for a handshake. The man smiled and shook Cindy's hand.